With mid-sized trucks like the Tacoma, the Frontier, the Gladiator, the Colorado, and others, often meeting or exceeding the price of full-size trucks like a Silverado, a Ram 1500, or an F-150, why do we keep buying mid-sized trucks? What is their appeal? Are they a good value? And are they a good choice for your lifestyle needs? Hi everyone, my name is Ian and you're watching Big Rock Media. So I've owned both full-size trucks and mid-size trucks. I've towed with them, I've taken cross-country road trips, I've loaded up the beds to their payload capacity, I've put my family in them, I've put them in garages, I've driven them around the city, and today I'm going to tell you the pros and cons of each choice. So what we're about to do is break down exactly what you need to know if you're trying to choose between a mid-size truck and a full-size truck. So before we dig in, let's cover the semantics just real briefly. So in modern truck lingo, what we talk about today, we talk about mid-size trucks, full-size trucks, and then heavy-duty trucks. But this is very confusing. There used to be compact trucks, which we now call mid-size trucks, and your compact trucks are making a comeback with things like the Ford Maverick. But let me lay this out for you. So something like the brand new Ford Maverick is more like an actual compact pickup truck. The mid-size trucks, things like the Tacoma, the Frontier, the Gladiator, the Colorado, those are called mid-size trucks. They are really not compact trucks in the way small trucks used to be like in the 80s. They've gotten a lot larger. And then we move up to something what we call a full-size truck. So a full-size truck could either be a half-ton truck or a heavy-duty truck. They're about the same size, although heavy-duty trucks tend to be a tiny bit larger, especially in the length. So I know all this is confusing. It's like going to order coffee at Starbucks. It's like, just tell me what it is, large or small, right? So today, what we call a mid-size truck is actually really similar dimensions to what a full-size truck used to be, maybe back in the 80s or even the early 90s. That's how much everything has moved up and gotten larger. As Americans have begun to use their trucks as family vehicles to haul their family to the mall and to soccer practice and to go to Home Depot and do things like that, you've seen cab sizes get much larger, people wanting more legroom, more cup holders, more luxuries, and in general you've seen the bed sizes actually get smaller on the average truck that's sold today. So let's talk about value and pricing. So if you just look at how much capability you can get for a certain amount of money, let's just say like $40,000, a full-size truck is going to win every day over a mid-size truck. It is true that a lot of full-size trucks will start out higher in price than a similar mid-size truck. However, keep in mind that traditionally, although right now it's kind of an exception due to supply issues, but traditionally full-size trucks have a lot of discounts or money that the manufacturers put on the hood and give to the dealers so that they can have a huge markdown. So in a traditional time, full-size trucks will actually be around the same price, if not sometimes less than the mid-size trucks, because the mid-sizers tend to get less of those discounts and rebates. But value is not really just about price, right? It's about what you need, how you use the vehicle, and how you enjoy it. And you don't drive a spec sheet and you don't drive a price sheet. So how do these trucks actually work in the real world? So let's talk about the pros first to a full-size truck. So they're kind of obvious, right? So it's mostly to do with room and capability in terms of towing and hauling. So let's talk about the interior room. So a full-size truck is about 5 inches on average, about 5 inches wider in the cab than a mid-size truck. So right away you get that extra width. So you're going to have larger interior storage cubbies, you're going to have more cup holders, you're going to have just more room in general. And then the cabs on the full-size trucks are also a bit stretched out lengthwise. So you get back seats with huge amounts of legroom. Some of the mid-size trucks you've probably noticed, especially things like the Tacoma and the Frontier, tend to have pretty cramped back seats, even in the 4-door model. Some of the newer competitors like the Gladiator are starting to get a little larger in the back seat, so that's good. But in general, full-size trucks are almost limousine-like in their backseat legroom. Let's talk about the pickup truck bed. So this is one that people love to talk about and argue about. So it is true that the average full-size truck sold in America today, again, is sold to a family that uses it for multiple things. And in order to have that big cab and still not have a truck that's too long to fit in their garage, most people are buying crew cab trucks with the 5.5-foot beds. Now on a full-size truck, you can get anywhere between the 5.5 foot bed to a 6.5 foot bed, going all the way up to the traditional long bed or regular bed, as they used to call it, which is 8 foot long. Although you see less and less full-size trucks now with 8 foot beds, unless they're commercial vehicles or heavy-duty trucks or used in fleets or construction workers and things like that. With a mid-size truck, the bed is going to be shorter. So mid-size trucks traditionally come with either a 5 foot bed or a 6 foot bed option. And some trucks now you can't even get a 6 foot bed. For instance, on my Jeep Gladiator, there is no option to get a 6 foot bed. So you're stuck to the 5 foot bed, which is really means it pushes it towards that lifestyle vehicle, maybe hauling some mountain bikes, picking up some soil at Home Depot, because it's honestly hard even to get like a motorcycle in there. The rear tire is almost going off the edge of the tailgate. So 5 foot bed can be extremely limiting in terms of utility for your truck. There's another thing when it comes to the bed sizes. It's also the volume of the bed, which is affected by the width. So like I mentioned, a full-size truck is 5 inches wider than a mid-size truck. So that additional 5 inches actually gains you quite a bit. You can put plywood back there easier. It just gives you that much more volume. So when we're talking about capability, we have to talk about towing and payload capabilities. So towing numbers, I'm going to have another video about this later because they become so misleading and just a focus for marketing nonsense, and they're in this fight to outdo each other. For instance, Ford now says the F-150 can tow 14,000 pounds, but try to find an F-150, first of all, that can actually tow 14,000 pounds because you'll never find that configuration, but then try to tow that much and still be within your payload, and that's the big problem, is the payload. But anyway, going back to towing and payload numbers, a full-size truck, because it has a larger frame and it's heavier built, they're going to have larger towing and payload capacities than the mid-size trucks. That's just the way it is. The engines are going to be larger and more powerful in a full-size truck. The suspensions are heavier duty. So a typical payload you might see on a full-size truck might be between, on the low end, like maybe around 1,400 on some of the trucks, all the way up to 2,000, and even more than that if you get some of the high payload packages you can get, but those tend to be kind of rare. On a mid-size truck, your payload capacity is probably going to be anywhere between 900 to 1,000 pounds on a low end, which is actually really limiting. Maybe up to 1,600 pounds if you have like a base model Gladiator. I think they have something around that number, which is actually really good for a mid-size truck. So what this means for your actual towing is that in reality, if you want to tow a trailer with a mid-size truck, you're really looking at a realistic limit of probably around 5,000 pounds. Because even if you have a 7,000 pound or 7,500 pound tow rating, maybe you have a Ranger, maybe you have a Gladiator, if you actually look at the payload and you factor in your family and the gear you're carrying, you're not going to be able to tow up to that maximum ability because you're going to be way over your payload first. And I have other videos about that, which I'll link here. On a full-size truck, again, we get into half-ton trucks versus heavy-duty trucks, and I'm not going to go deep dive into that. But in general, a full-size truck, you're going to be looking at tow ratings between maybe 7,500 and 13,000 pounds, and payloads, like I mentioned, between 1,400 and 2,000. So you can tow a trailer with a full-size half-ton truck, probably up to 8,000 or 9,000 pounds is going to be the upper limit on a half-ton full-size truck. If you go into the heavy-duty trucks, then we start going up from there, and that gets complicated. We're not going to go into that right now. But there's a pretty big jump, again, between the mid-size and the full-size trucks in terms of the trailer you're actually going to be able to tow. So if you want to tow something like an R-Pod or a Geo Pro or even like a pop-up camper, a mid-size truck is great for that. But if you start getting into like 24, 25, 26-foot travel trailers that are getting into that 6,000 pound, 7,000 pound, 8,000 pound range, that's pushing you out of the mid-size trucks and then into the full-size trucks. What about horsepower and torque? So this is getting really interesting because manufacturers are, having a lot of cool powertrain options out there. Now you've got hybrid options out there, you've got turbocharged options, but in general, if we try to draw a line between the mid-size and the full-sizers, it's still hard because there are base engines on some of the mid-size trucks that sometimes are even weaker than the optional engines on the mid-size trucks. So it gets very confusing. But if you look at something like the average Ram 1500 that's sold, let's just use that as an example. The average one comes with their 5.7 liter Hemi V8. It puts out around 400 horsepower and 400 torque. If you compare that to a midsize offering, let's say my Jeep Gladiator, right, made from the same parent company, Chrysler Fiat. That truck, or my truck I should say, with a 3.6 liter V6 is around 285 horsepower and I think around 265 foot-pounds of torque. So a huge drop in power there going down from that full-size V8 truck to the midsize V6 truck. What about fuel economy? So fuel economy is a really big deal these days with gas in some areas, especially where I live, being upwards of $4 a gallon. So here's one of the interesting things that I've noticed about full-size versus mid-size is that the fuel mileage is not as different as you would think. There are full-size trucks with efficient powertrains like some of Ford's hybrids or their EcoBoost engines that sometimes get equal or better miles per gallon than their mid-size truck counterparts. So don't buy a mid-size truck thinking that you're going to save money on gas. In fact, if you look at something like my Gladiator or a Toyota Tacoma, two popular options, they really don't get better gas mileage than their full-size counterparts in, let's say, an F-150 or a Silverado or a Ram. The exception is the Tundra because the Tundra is a very old platform and it gets horrendous miles per gallon. So if you take that out of the equation, then what I'm saying is still true. So what about some downsides to a full-size truck? Well, there are some. So a full-size truck is harder to deal with in a parking lot because it's wider and it's longer. So it's just harder to maneuver parking garages, tight parking areas at Costco, wherever you want to go shopping. It's a little bit more vehicle to deal with and you tend to park further away from the entrance. Also, the turning radius can be quite a bit longer on the full-size trucks, one because they're a longer vehicle and sometimes they just don't have this type of turning radius, but every truck's a little bit different there. The other downside to a full-size truck is that depending on the size of your garage or your parking area, you may not be able to fit certain full-size trucks in your garage, whereas most garages will take a mid-size truck. So that's a big factor for some people. So make sure if you're in the market for a truck, measure your garage length and width, see what space you're working with, and make sure the truck you want to buy is going to fit. Another disadvantage to full-size trucks is off-roading. So this is a huge one for me and really is one of the reasons that I'm in a mid-size Gladiator right now, is that for doing the trails that I like to do, like actual serious Jeep trails and off-road trails, a full-size truck is just a bit too large and especially it's too wide. I've taken trails on my Gladiator that I simply would be impossible to do in a larger full-size truck just because they'd be too wide and they'd slip off the edge of the trail or not be able to fit between obstacles. A lot of trails out there really are, you know, from the old days when vehicles were smaller and you had Jeeps and they're just very narrow. And so a full-size truck is very challenging. I actually wanted to buy a Ford Raptor, but I determined it was just too large for the places that I wanted to go off-road. Another disadvantage of full-size trucks is that they don't drive quite as sporty on the road. They're a little bit heavier, they're a little bit more ponderous in the steering, they're a little bit larger. So if you're someone who kind of likes still driving cars and likes a little bit more athletic feeling vehicle, like going around corners, things like that, then a mid-size truck might be a little bit better. But some of the full-size trucks are so good now that honestly they drive just as well. So let's talk about the pros to the mid-size trucks. So the pros to the mid-size trucks are kind of the opposite of, you know, the full-size trucks, right? So they're easier to park, parking garages, parking lots, easier to maneuver. They're going to fit in your garage better. They have a sportier drive. They feel more like a car-like driving experience. And again, they're going to be better off-road. So if you're going to do a lot of off-roading, then really you might be looking at, you know, the Tacoma, the Gladiator, something like that instead of the full-size counterpart, just because of the size. What about cons to a mid-size truck? So again, it kind of goes back to what we talked about in the pros to a full-size truck and just reversing that. So you have less interior room, you have less space in the cab, less storage, less room for your family, less leg room in the back. The bed volume is smaller. So if you need to haul a lot of stuff in your bed, a lot of construction materials or motorcycles or whatever you want to haul, then really take a look at the bed on a mid-size truck because it's quite a bit smaller in length and in width than a full-size truck. The other con, of course, is the cost and the value. They're just not as good a value for money when you look at the capability you're getting for the money. Now, if your definition of what you want to do includes like going off-road, then that's a value to you, and that's something that's hard to quantify, so that may push you into the mid-size truck, even though you could get a full-size truck that would haul better and tow better and have more room for the same money. But if you're an off-road person, then that doesn't matter to you, and you need the smaller truck for that. And I think one of the biggest downsides to the mid-size truck is that they don't really save hardly any gas compared to the full-size offerings nowadays, especially with the advanced powertrains that so many manufacturers have. So final thoughts on this debate. You're going to have to really consider your needs. What do you want to do with a truck? If you're more of a lifestyle person, I mean like mountain bikes or going off-roading, going on trail.
I'm so sorry. sorry. Is this still rolling?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, well, short interruption there. The baby wanted to be part of the video. So this is Sierra, and she likes to go in the back of the Jeep Gladiator. So again, in considering your needs for a full-size or mid-size truck, again, think about what your needs are. If you prioritize towing and hauling heavy loads, bigger trailers, you need more room in the bed, then you're going to look at that full-size truck. If you want, more of a lifestyle vehicle, again, mountain bikes, going to the trailhead, hauling a few small things, and you can live with a smaller cab and a smaller bed, then the mid-size truck's right for you. There's no right or wrong answer to this, and I continue to go back and forth between the two. I really appreciate both, and I wish I could own both. I think overall, I feel that the full-size trucks are definitely a much better bang for your buck, and you get more for the money. But I do like how mid-size trucks drive. I like the off-road ability. I like the size a little bit better. So it's kind of a toss-up for me, and I'll probably keep going back and forth. If I was rich, I would just have both. So we'd like to thank you for watching. Sierra says hi to everybody. Huh? What? Yeah? So there's a few things you can do to support the channel and support my family here. You can subscribe and make sure you hit the bell for notifications. You can give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and also consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can buy little Sierra here more diapers. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time. Drive safe. See you on the next video.